This is just the beginning. That's the world that we live in. Let me help you believe in what we can do when we stand united. We are one with the world. We can make a brighter tomorrow. Together make a change. It's our life. We can't step back from what we know is right. So let's shine our light. Oh, let's shine our light. We won't listen to what they're saying. We know it's just love that we're giving to this place that we call our home. We can't change what's been done, but it's still our run. We are one with the world. We can make a brighter tomorrow. Together make a change. It's our life. We can't step back from what we know is right. So let's shine our light.
Hi, I'm Sanjay Roy, the co-chair of the Catalyzing Change Week Programming Committee. Welcome to Catalyzing Change Week 2024. This is where we'll not just have conversations, but we'll actually see change. We'll see change makers, innovators within the social space. You'll meet government folks and funders. You'll see people who've done excellent good practice that we can learn from. And most importantly, it'll be a place to network, learn, and exchange ideas. So do dive right in to the Catalyzing Change Week 2024 and enjoy the experience. Hi, I'm Sanjay Roy, the coach.
Good morning, good afternoon, good night from wherever you're connecting today. My name is Susana Ramirez. I'm part of the Secretariat of Catalyst 2030, and I'm very happy to welcome you to this amazing session in our last day of Catalyzing Change Week. Our session today is about addressing complexity with a localized whole community approach. So we hope you enjoy the session today. And to ensure that this happens, we just want to remind you on some housekeeping rules. Please keep your video open if that's a possibility. That ensures that the interaction it's better between us. Also, if you are able to share your name and company in the chat or renaming yourself in Zoom, that'll be amazing. Also, try to keep yourself muted unless you want to participate. And if that's the case, please ensure that you raise your hand and we'll be able to hand over to you. And most importantly, enjoy this session. And with this, I'll directly hand over to Brenda. Brenda, over to you.
Okay, I'm so mellow now from that music that that was inspiring, that I'm telling you. Okay, so let's get started. Let me just see. Okay, so welcome. It's nice to see some familiar faces. So it's good that people are interested in this concept of addressing complexity with a whole community approach. This is really about systemic collaboration. That's how we're referring to it, as for social, environmental, and economic well-being. And Luis Patricio is helping me out today. He brings a really interesting perspective to this. We've shared our bios. One of the things that you'll see is that both Luis and I are very eclectic in our background, and I think maybe that helps a little bit. But this is just to let you know that we've been at this for a while. One of the funniest things about this bio, and this is a bio that I use a lot of times when I'm doing a keynote address and somebody else is interviewing me. And the funniest thing is that when one young, very nervous woman introduced me, She mentioned the award that I had won as a YWCA Woman of Distinction, which for me, I'm really proud of, and it was a really big deal. But instead of introducing me as a woman of distinction, she introduced me as a woman of dysfunction, which is probably more accurate. But so that's me. And Luis, do you want to jump in and introduce yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. That's an interesting story, Brenda. I'm glad you took it, lightly. Welcome everyone. Excited for next hour together. My name is Luis Patricio. I'm based in London, Ontario, Canada, working in the nonprofit sector for more than 10 years now. I've worked in all the sectors. And I also am a part-time teacher at the university. I teach environmental stewardship, and I've been working with SDGs for quite a few years now. So, and primarily the SDGs at the local level, at the municipal level. So super excited for a conversation today. Back to you, Brenda.
Excellent, thank you. So I thought it might be an idea to start with this cartoon, and it's really, for me, demonstrates that the complexity path, as you can see on the right. It's not a crowded pathway, but I think a lot of times this is where you'll find the social innovators and the social entrepreneurs. I think sometimes it's a tough path. There's no doubt about it. It's often a lonely path. And I really need to plug Catalyst 2030, because I know for many of us that's been really important in being able to connect to other social entrepreneurs who are doing the same kind of work. So thank you even for showing up today, because it shows that there is some interest in what we're doing on our lonely path. It is complicated and it is hard work. And as we were, as Louise and I were preparing for this session, we both talked about our respective work and how challenging it has been, and how we had tried, independent of one another, how we had tried so many different ways over the years of explaining our work, why it was important, and how it was different. So I think between us, we've probably done a lot of different versions of presentations. And as I started to prepare the first draft of this session, I think I got a little overly enthusiastic in terms of sharing the tools and the resources that we had developed. And Luis went through it, and he very gently, he's very kind, and he's very tactful, and he said, Brenda, the tools and the resources are really important, but I think what might be more important here is to tell more of the stories. So this is a later version. It's the first time I think well, every time I do a presentation, it's a little bit different, but I think that this was challenging to tell other people's stories, because our role throughout this has been as coaches to communities. We're a little bit at arm's length. So I didn't really think they were always our stories to tell, or we didn't want those communities to think we were taking credit for their work. So that's been a bit of a challenge, but we've done that. And I think we've also learned that as much as I want to share case studies, that it's difficult, because if it doesn't happen to resonate specifically with you and what you're interested in, you might dismiss a lot of the learning. So I hope that you can hang in there with us as we tell the stories. And what I ended up doing to simplify the complexity, not make it simpler, but to simplify what we have been doing. I went back to this model that I use a lot, and this might be a good takeaway for some of you, or some of you may already be using this, but this is a model that I use for communication and for a lot of teaching. And I love it because what it does, it incorporates different learning and communication styles, and this model is developed to speak to all community, I guess the best model really for communicating to people with different learning and communication styles. So that's how this presentation is set up. We've divided it into why a whole community approach. So we sometimes forget to start with why this is important, because we get so immersed. I know that's often the case with me. Then we're going to talk about what what are we doing at a kind of a higher level, like an overall description, and that's where we'll get into a case study, an example. It's not really, it's a story. It's stories from a community. And then we'll go to how, and somehow, I don't know. Then we'll go to how, and get into more of what I really want, I'm excited about showing, which are the tools and the resources, and then the what if. And that's the call to action, because we do have a one-pager, if you can believe it, that kind of pulls all this together and shows you where we want to go next. So that's the plan. I'm going to stop at the end of each quarter, and that's where we hope to hear your stories, your questions, your comments, because we know there's no one best way to do any of this, and we want to hear from you. That's also where Luis is going to check in at the end of each quarter as well, so we can hear from you. Okay, that's good. You're nodding. Okay, perfect. Okay, so here's the why. Here's the why. And look, this is for the visual learners among us. In each corner, upper right corner of each slide, you'll be able to see what quarter in the communication process we're at. So this is why. So why a whole community approach? Well, I think we have learned, and I'm assuming you have as well, that complex issues need to be localized. That there truly is wisdom at the roots, and I think sometimes we forget about that. We also know the United Nations, the World Health Organization, the World Economic Forum have all said that the SDGs need to be localized. The United Nations has said we're not going to advance. We'll be missing advancing 65% of the SDGs if we don't localize them. So we know that's important. We've also learned the whole community approach is important because, you know, the weirder the mix when you bring people together, when you bring those the mix together, the better the fix. We also know that the complexity and root causes, we have to get away from one-off projects that have a beginning and an end and really look at multi-sector community-led initiatives. So that's an important part of the why. And, you know, when the communities that we've been working with across Canada, at least, and I know we're hearing a lot of stories from other communities as well, is that these issues that we're all dealing with are really complicated. And if you look at this table, every single community is dealing with multiples of what is listed here. And these are complicated challenges and issues. So again, another why. And of course, the SDGs. It really is, and I think we are seeing it as a shared language for systems collaboration, a simpler way to address the complexity of communities. This has been instrumental in engaging new and diverse stakeholders, which are important for innovation, bringing in citizens and youth especially. New sources of funding, it can open up for you. And we do see that this is helping us make a case for more scaling, more policy for multi-sectoral initiatives, more promising practices, more peer sharing. So, but I think a lot of what we're doing is about goal 17. I know when I was interviewed to become a member of Catalyst, Catalyst has this great vetting process. They don't just let anyone be a member. You actually have to be interviewed. And one of the questions they asked was, what goal are you focused on? What is it that's important to you? And for me, that was kind of a no-brainer. It's really because these are all intertwined in so many ways. The partnership piece, the collaboration piece is critical. I think the other thing that has added to the complexity is that a lot of this work is already being done. It's just being called by different names. And I think that adds to the complexity. I know the UN was referring to it as whole of society. We're finding that people didn't always understand that. Whole communities has worked really well for us. But I also had a conversation recently with a director at the United Nations, And what he said is that I had to add integrated economy to my slide because that's the terminology that they're using. So I just wanted to convey that it doesn't really matter what you call it. If any of these initiatives in your community are bubbling up, then it's something to latch on regardless of what it's called. We did learn that whole communities at the grassroots level, the citizen level, they understand what we mean by that. And this is where I'm going to end up on this why section and invite your comments, your feedback. We'd really like to know if this resonates, if you think this will resonate with other people. But I wanted to end on this cartoon because I think this one cartoon in so very many ways explains the challenge. This is what we are trying to address, this lack of balance, not only in our communities, but in the world at large, is that business interests have taken precedent. Economic development is our priority. And even our young generation are really been conditioned to think that that brings happiness, that it's about money. And on the other side, on the short side, the very short side, is everything else, and everything else that relates to quality of life. So working at the grassroots level, that's what we're attempting to address. So I'm going to stop my share now so we can see one another. Well, we can see a lot of black space, but we can see some smiling faces. So thank you for that. So we've just explained why whole communities. So we're interested in hearing what you're doing around whole communities. Is this resonating? And you can speak too, if you that would be great if you could unmic and actually speak. We'd love to hear from you.
And Brenda, if I can just add a couple of points
Yes.
while our participants are gathering their thoughts. There is a reason that we have an SDG dedicated to cities, and you touched on that point, that there is an understanding from the UN and many of the partners that, and I think the magical number is 65. I see different numbers in different places, but 65% of the indicators and targets can only be achieved if actually there's active participation of not only local governments, but the local networks. And if you think about it, issues like transportation, public spaces, water management, when you think about the watersheds, those things are all local. When you think about waste management, how we're dealing with the, yes, plastic pollution is a global issue, but how each municipality regulates and collects and disposes of this garbage, the local stakeholders, again, not just governments, but the social enterprises who figure out models on how to address that issue varies dramatically from city to city. Food, the whole movement around local food and organic, especially with the pandemic and the disruption from the global supply chain, and then people starting to get scared about, oh, our supermarkets will be, the shelves will be empty. So the importance of have food security and sovereignty. And this is all of those and many more are primarily local issues, not just local issues, but definitely the localizing the SDGs has a huge role to play in addressing many of those things. And I'm always speaking from a Canadian perspective because that's what I've been working with for many, many years now. And just to bring a little insight in terms of the economy, the inclusive economy also, a big component of it is localizing and supporting those social enterprises, small startups. And in Canada, the majority of the SMEs, how we call it here, social and medium enterprises, they comprise the majority, they employ the majority of the workers, and they generate the majority of the GDP, national GDP. So even though we can have the big corporations and they would have a significant chunk of, GDP, when we see them individually, big corporation to big corporation, when we actually put all those things together, it still is the social and medium enterprises, the small businesses and entrepreneurs who are boosting our economy. So really understanding that in terms of what it means to localize is to be able to create mechanisms where we can support those SMEs in Canada. And I believe that will be the same case for many other countries around the world.
Thanks for sharing, Luis. Jacob, you posted something in the chat. Are you okay speaking up?
Yeah, sure. And hello, everyone. So yeah, I think, as I said, if you can't just naturally, if people aren't naturally open to collaborating, this was early, this was, back in 2022 when I was sort of just getting into this career path. Um, I had I had a meeting with one of my old mentors from my geology days, and he was telling me about a local organization in Arlington, Texas. And it was a Bible translation organization. And so there was a fundraising event. One of the donors came up to one of the leaders of this organization and I might be paraphrasing a little bit, but it was like, there's 10 of y'all around the world doing somewhat the same thing, and we give to all of you. And so if you find a way to formally create a collective, we'll drastically increase our donation amounts and just increase efficiency. And I'm going to put a model that I think also helps, that is it's different, but I think it's still applicable, is this design build institute model. I'm going to put the link in the chat for everyone, but I think pushing on the funding side, where it's a greater spotlight, efficiency, communication, all of that stuff, collective impact is prime for increasing funding.
I think it's coming for sure. I think there are the early adopters out there who are ready, and I think that's actually been one of our key learnings, is that that's who we work with. We're not trying to change people's behaviors, because when you're doing something that is not mainstream, it's easier to start with those who want what you're selling. So that's been important. Okay, so we'll keep going, but again, keep plugging into that chat, because it's great to hear, to get your feedback, and others can relate to that as well. So let's go with that. Let me just. Oops. Okay, so we're going to move on to the what. The what. And this is where I think we'll get more into the storytelling that will illustrate the approach that kind of evolved. So in the work I know that I was doing, that's really what I can speak to. We ended up working with over 60 different communities. So this what piece started out and kind of evolved, and so we can now we can better describe it at a kind of a high level, I suppose. And now my slides won't advance. Just 1 second. Not sure why that is. So I'm just gonna have to stop my share and try again. Maybe not.
Brenda, I have them as well if you want me to share.
Do you think I need help? Thanks. I somehow had it buried, so apologize. Not enough coffee yet this morning. So I want to tell you a story about one of the first communities that we worked with using this whole community approach. We were working with 10 communities at a time. We kind of brought them in as flights. They had applied, and that's really how we found the early adopters. And it was because they were interested in a whole community approach, in that they felt they were losing their quality of life. So this is a very small town, but what we ended up learning is that there needed to be catalysts for change. There needed to be a smaller cohort of influencers in the community. So in this case, there were 3 key individuals, and I think this again speaks to the diversity. One was a retired school teacher, one was a rancher, and another was a bank manager. And so they became the catalysts. And we brought our leaders into a retreat setting. I'm not sure we would have to do that now, I think, because we're getting a little clearer, but they do need to connect with one another. In this case, it was 10 different communities. because they learned from one another. That was really critical. What we encouraged them to do was to begin with a project. We didn't have anything particular in mind. This is one of the things that makes it different from collective impact. The community had to determine what was important for them. And we ended up referring to these as collaborative quick success projects. And so in this case, and I'll never forget at this retreat, these two women came running up to us and said, we got it, we know what we're going to do. It's going to be like a barn raising bee, except it's not going to be a barn, it's going to be a playground. And so what they did was arrange, they did a lot of prep work, but in 6 weeks, this core team raised $146,000 in cash and in kind. They rallied 200 volunteers who all showed up on the same day. A lot of kids also showed up who were helpful. And what they did in that one day was build a playground, a skateboard park, a beach ball volleyball court. They installed park benches. They cleaned up the arena. They planted flowers through the park and down the main street. And then, and this is what always happens, is they look at each other and say, okay, what's next? And so what ended up happening was they built a trail. And in this case, one of our coaching roles was to help them find a landscaper and someone who had experience in trail development so they could figure out where to put that trail. That was important. They had an art show. They had one of the things that they brought in, they had an arts festival really, and they brought in Communities in Bloom. The seniors, they were looking at intergenerational kind of events too. So the seniors, but this is one I can't quite figure out. The seniors volunteered for a battle of the bands, and the teens and the seniors had a pool party. So there was that quick success that started to bring the community together and showed what these smaller projects could do when they all worked together. But that ultimately also led to broader systems. Oh, sorry. So wow, technology is not cooperating with me today. But what it led to was a lot of other more business related initiatives. They brought in their whole community approach, they brought together 20 people from their community who each contributed $10,000 to a cooperative fund that invested in other businesses that would attract people to the community. So they invested in an organic meat packing plant. They helped a partnership by the local Legion and open a cafe. They formed a green energy co-op. The green energy co-op was interesting because it happened as two guys had a conversation as they were helping clear the trails in the community. So that's what led to the broader sharing in information. And when we looked at describing it after the fact and gathering all these learnings from all these communities, we realized that it was these three pathways that led to more informed decision making. That was a significant impact. Increased trust among citizens, businesses, government, and social purpose organizations, because at the grassroots level, they were all working together. It amplified the innovation in a way we hadn't seen, and ultimately led to individual social, economic, and environmental benefits. And that was something that we really hadn't foreseen. We hadn't foreseen that how important hope and trusted relationships were among the stakeholders. And those quick success projects were so important for that. So I'm going to stop right there and stop sharing my screen and ask you if that process resonates. I'm sure in your own communities, you've seen projects. I know Luis did as well. And I'm wondering if you've seen those kind of paths emerge in your communities.
I was looking at the chat and I trying to follow up. I saw that Daryl had an interesting example of like a potential project in his community back in Kenya. I don't know if you'd like to share a little bit more about that, Daryl, if you're comfortable.
Yeah, I can share. Hello.
Hi.
Hello.
Hello, we can hear you.
Yep.
Okay, yeah. Like the project concept that I have is on solid waste management. You've seen challenges in solid waste, like the area where I am, the solid waste, it's a big issue because it affects agriculture as well and the environment itself. So I'm seeing the containers, the paper bags, they're just being thrown away around. There's no proper way of disposing them. But I came to think about it, and I found like maybe this is a project that can bring a huge impact on environmental conservation. Like you see, if we collect these paper bags and plastics, and we see a way they can be maybe grinded or recycled, then we make maybe other items locally for even the people from the community. And again, the glasses, always you see they're just getting broken and they just get thrown around. There's no proper way of disposing them. And I came to realize that these glasses can be crushed in a way. And probably if there are some that can be used, there's some techniques in construction that they can use. They mix the glass with the cement, then they do some construction, which this one will help in cleaning, like even apart from just environment safety, because the glass can always cut somebody, and it can cause many very bad injuries around. And as long as there's injuries, then again, the community, the people in the community will suffer the medical aspect of it, the treatment, taking care of these wounds again. So instead of investing that money for doing something, they go for treatment. Maybe they, like in where I am, not everybody has the medical cover. It's a challenge again. So I was looking into in terms of like the biodegradable items, like the ones from the households, the one that you can put together and make them, use them like organic manure. This will again boost the agriculture at the same time, and we'll have good soil with no plastic, no glasses. Then again, the same project will be able to create employment for people around, because all these ways will be, maybe they can think of a way they can like supply some this polythene bags that can hold waste from the household. Then you have a group of maybe youth, they're going to pick them from the households, then take them at a central place where they get sorted out. So plastic, or maybe separately, the metallic substances, the glass, and now the biodegradable. Then you decide on how now to use them to make them, it's like adding value to them, so that we don't see them as a waste, but we see them as a potential way of getting income and employing the youths around. So it's a kind of a project that I'm thinking of, but I know my main challenge will be just finance, getting the machine that I'm thinking of that can crush this maybe waste and see a way that they can be made useful.
Thanks,
Thank
Daryl. Those are great examples, because not only are you doing something important for the environment, but I think it really contributes to a community's sense of pride and the sense of hope that they can do something when they all work together. So I appreciate that sharing. And if you've got your email in the chat, it would be great for if others want to connect with you and learn more. Really appreciate that. Thank you.
I'll share it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And Jacob shared the link on the chat that might be relevant.
Oh, good.
And I believe Sarah is here on the call as well, from the Movement for Community-Led Development.
Yes.
So thanks for sharing.
Perfect. Thank you all. Okay, so that's a little bit about the what that we learned. And I think that what you will end up seeing is that the practices that we realized we had to reinforce with these communities, there was never one thing that was the answer. It was a combination of community-led development. It was encouraging citizens and all the other stakeholders to think about their community as an ecosystem. It was about having them think about the future, which is sometimes what we miss with community-led development. We really need to ensure that they have the information to make good decisions about the future. I always say, we teach history in every school in the world, but we need to teach the future as well, to really be positioned more strongly for the future. There's a different set of skills for sector connector leadership, and the digital optimization. We've got to figure out how to prioritize and bring that in. So that's kind of the what. But I want to just talk a little bit about the process that we used, and so this is where I get to share some of the tools. Oh my goodness. I think I'm going to need your help, Susanna, because for some reason my slides are not advancing.
Absolutely. Let me just pull them in. Here we go.
I'm not normally this technically inept. I have to tell you that, just so that you don't lose faith.
I testify. I testify.
I think it's just been a very long week, as I'm sure all of you can attest. Okay, if we could go to the next slide. That one. Okay, because this was a big learning for us, and it helped us understand why we were doing something a bit different. I had a conversation with a futurist from North Carolina, and in one of my first conversations with him, he said to me, Brenda, there's two kinds of change. There's change that reforms, and there's change that transforms. And he says most of what we're doing these days is about change that reforms. And so I started thinking about this in terms of what we had seen and learned from these communities. And we realized that a lot of the collaboration was at the bottom two levels of the pyramid. We saw a difference in terms of collaboration when we moved to collective impact. The difference between what collective impact is and what we were doing was that collective impact traditionally has been about different sectors and organizations coming together to address a specific issue, whether it was housing or poverty. And what we did instead, because we wanted to mobilize citizens and the community as much as the service providers, we let the community decide what the priorities were, and we worked from assets as opposed to needs. It was more of a strength-based approach, and it was really about deliberately bringing together government, social profits, businesses, and individual community members. So if you look at the next slide, you'll see that this tool was really important, and we can make it available to you if you'd like. It's been a work in progress for many, many years. It's a community checkup. And what we use is as a conversation starter in our communities, but it was gently nudging people to be system thinkers, to really look at their whole community or their whole neighborhood. What we learned from a lot of small communities, we're now applying to a neighborhood level. So we also are now working with two other Canada chapter members to apply AI to this kind of research as well. But we had everyone to look at the things that really impacted them on a daily basis: the economy, the social environment, the environment in general, their health, their access to physicians, their access to public transportation, all of that. We forced them, and of course, culture. And it gently nudged them. We didn't really force them. We gently nudged them to think about their community as a whole. And this is really the only thing that we saw that changed mindsets. It's when they sat in a circle, saw and heard other people's stories. This is what made a difference. So we have that tool. And on the next slide, it's nice having somebody else. Apparently can't multitask today, Susanna, so thank you. The other thing that we've been working on for a lot of years is a generic planning framework. And this is because a lot of people in terms of working with community leaders, they found that planning was their weakest link. That there was a lot of confusion about the different kinds of plans and how they were approached and how consultants were involved. And we saw that typically a conventional planning started at step 6. We observed 5 steps that were all about engaging, motivating, and mobilizing citizens. We also know that, as I said, there's no one best way. And so what we treated this as almost like a recipe book with tabs. And behind each of these steps, we have a collection of about 300 different tools and resources. So regardless of what step you are at, there are different tools that you can use that work for you and your community. We weren't sure if they should be numbered, these steps. One of the things we learned, though, if you miss a step, you need to back it up. You need to back it up. So I don't want to go into a lot of detail with this, but know that something like this exists if it can be of use to you. And it's really what we emphasize in our courses and our training. So the next slide is about the workbook that we also put into the hands of these communities. It's a planning workbook that helps reinforce those 10 steps and what they can do at each step. And the next slide is the I think one of the most important learnings that came out of all of this, and this only came fairly recently because I was writing, starting to write a paper for PMI, the Project Management Institute, and trying to explain how what we were doing was different. This white paper, which I'm happy to share as well, really identified that we always think of three sectors. We think of government, business, and what Canada calls the social purpose sector. That includes charities, nonprofits. Businesses with a predominant social agenda are also included under the social purpose sector, as are cooperatives and networks. But what we forgot and what we need to consider as a key sector are the citizens. Because when you think about, they're the consumers and supporters of the other three sectors. They're the experts on their community. We need to bring them in. So then we ask the big question, why aren't we doing this? Why aren't we coming together more? And what we realized is that it isn't really anyone's job. And that when we look back at the communities that we were working with, we had some informal sector connectors. And we did also realize that there were some competencies needed for them to become better sector connectors. So if you move to the next slide, you'll see that this sector connector is neutral. That's what's really important. They're a catalyst. They are the ones that gathered, and this is what they happened in that case study that I shared with you. They gathered the interested citizens and staff from different sectors. I think, Jacob, you call them orchestrators. Yeah, I think there's different names for them. But sector connectors seem to be a term that was understood. They connect the grassroots to the grass tops. They can support and advocate for needed policies and funding, and they encourage big picture thinking, and they can recommend tools and technologies. It's a coaching role more than anything, but it's a very distinct set of competencies, what we also eventually figured out. So on the next slide, you'll see that what we did was articulate what those competencies were. And we didn't come up with these on our own. We couldn't find a leadership assessment tool just because most of them were so very corporate. So in a series of focus groups across the country, in every meeting we had, we asked people, what do you want to see in your leaders? What skills, what knowledge, what attitudes? And Jacob, I'm going to answer your question because I saw it just pop up. But all of the courses that we have are based on delivering these 8 competencies. They all have indicators, and we use them for measurement on a pre and post basis. And our moonshot is that we hope to have that. We hope to have that in every college and university as a value-added micro certification. So if you're nursing or engineering or social services or health, doesn't matter, you still need to work with your community. It's a different set of competencies, and it came it's really practice-based research more than anything. So this has been a work in progress for probably about 15 years. So it's been well tested. And it is, yes, Sylvie, it is about boundary spanning leadership. And Suzanne, if you go to the next slide, this is the other thing that became much clearer, is that this whole community, yes, it is another way, we're calling things by different names for sure. But I think one of the ways we distinguished what we were doing is that it's internal building, we're building external capacity versus internal capacity. And a lot of what we learn in our schools, I know this was the case with where I was going was that it was about this conventional leadership and capacity building. So we were all learning about things like governance and planning and facility maintenance and sustainability and marketing and communication and HR. Not that those things are not important, they are. But this set of competencies, the ones that we're focused on, is external. No, that's okay. We can keep going. I want to hear from the rest of you, and I just have a couple of slides here, I think. I also want you to know we figured out how to scale this. We have figured out how to scale this, create a ripple effect by coaching the coaches. I have a course running right now with 20 staff from the City of London, where Luis is located, where they are learning and using a lot of the same material to coach their coaches, who then work at the neighborhood level and create this ripple effect as they bring together diverse stakeholders. So the next slide is, oh, that's the how. So I guess I want to ask if you have any questions about the how. And then I just have one pager to show you. It's our what if after that. So far so good. I love the comments about the, we are using different names for a lot of the same work. And I think more than ever, that's why it's important for us to come together. So that's one of the calls to action that we would like to make. We want to bring together people who are committed to a whole community approach. Okay, well then I'll just go to the we have a few minutes left, but I'll just go to the, I don't know, Luis, do you have anything else to add before I go to the one pager?
No, I was just following thank you for all the comments and suggestions and links on the chat. So I was trying to keep up with the conversation in the chat. It's almost, this what happens these days, right? On those online sessions. It's almost like a parallel session going on in the chat.
Yes.
Guided by your comments, Brenda. So really thank you for bringing all those models. And we had one question. Folks were asking about access to those slides so they can refer back to the models and examples that you're giving. And I said I would ask you if you're able to share, and probably Susanna has the link, the list of participants. And we probably can look at if you can save that chat. I think there's rich information there too, in terms of links that can be useful, or books or projects that we've been sharing on the chat. So if you can share those two resources after the session, that would be awesome.
That's why I'm so glad that you're with us, Luis, because you're so much better with the details than I am. As you can tell, I'm very right-brained, so those details sometimes escape me. For sure. So thank you for that. And yes, I will share the slides. And if you also want to connect with me on LinkedIn, that's probably the best way to keep in touch with what we're going, because we really are going to gather these mavericks who are working at a whole community level. We've applied for funding from a number of different sources, and we're just kind of crossing our fingers because we want to find other pilot communities who want to go along this journey and keep the growth happening. So let me show you the one pager. This, I don't know that we could have done it until recently, but there we go. It's a one pager to explain our what if. So in that model, we talked about the why and the what and the how, and this is the what if. And so this is a theory of change. We've actually started some of it, but what this really comes down to is us really thinking about the challenge that is ahead of us, and what if we took everything that we've learned from these communities and others as well, and that's where the invitation is coming to you, to invest in some key activities. And what we've really seen is that we need to invest in growing this whole community sector connector leadership capacity at all levels, because leadership is a title. It's not a title. That's what, sorry. We've just learned so much about the fact that leadership is not about a title, it's about a behavior. And that's why that leadership capacity is important. We need to build organizational capacity. And that's that's really what we want to emphasize with participants, that or with funders especially, that we need to invest in leadership capacity, organizational capacity, and community capacity. And if you could just take me back to that slide, Susanna, there, okay, yeah. So what we plan on doing, what we've applied for funding to do and hope to do are these pilot communities. We want to build a collaborators digital platform so we can continue the learning, informal learning, the sharing of the tools, and create this ripple effect. As I said, we're working with a number of other Canada chapter members to apply artificial intelligence to the measurement and this sector connector micro-credentialed certificate course. We have most of that. It probably needs to be refined. We're testing it now, as I said, with the City of London, but we have the bones of it for sure to be able to take it into colleges and universities. And we know that that's what's going to lead us to these short and midterm outcomes. So I guess that's where I can end it. If we have any, I feel like I've been running really hard and fast to get this. And so I'm hoping this is landed and that it provides some simplicity for what has been a very complex journey. So any last thoughts from you, Luis, or from anyone else?
Brenda, I think we have a couple of questions in the
Yes.
chat.
Okay.
I don't know if you had a chance to address those. And Mike, maybe we need a bit more context.
Yep.
in
Mike, do you want to jump in?
What incentives drive success, Brenda? So I don't know if it's a question specifically about something that she was talking about.
Yeah, so first, Brenda, thank you. It's so inspiring. Got to tell you, my late mother was also a woman of distinction. YWCA, a woman of distinction. Although I'm based in Los Angeles, I was born in Vancouver, British Columbia, and lots to share about our amazing country. But I just, incentives are so important for lots of different things. And there's a great Harvard Business Review article. It's called The Essential Link Between ESG Targets and Financial Performance. And I am wondering, Mark Kramer and Mark Pitzer are the authors of this seminal article that was published in 2022. And the idea is that both social impact and financial impact can coexist. And when they do, it's pretty exciting. And so I am the Tamarack Institute, I'm sure you're familiar with in Canada, and all of the amazing community stuff they do. I would just love you to make some comments about incentives in general in the context of community building. Although I have two past, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I thought you were, I think that's a great question, and I really do appreciate it. I think people really do want to make a difference when it's their community. So I think the localization is key, even to involve businesses and corporations at the local level, because then it's very personal. It's personal to them, their friends, and their families. But I think the other thing that motivates people is that we're not necessarily trying to change businesses and government and social profits. What we're trying to do is use their respective skills, their respective knowledge and experience and assets. And I think that makes it much less threatening when you come together and the ideas bubble up and you see the hands in the room start to go up and say, well, I could do this and I could do that. And then it's not overwhelming for anyone either. And so the collective synergy, I think, is what starts to bubble up and starts to happen. And that's what gets people excited, because I think up until then, a lot of them didn't know what to do. They didn't know where to start. And I think that that's really key as well. I don't know if does that help?
So you're saying that just because it's local, that the local nature is the incentive. It's not a finance. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I think that's a big part of it. That's not to say that you couldn't take, I really think I could take the same process into corporations and their stakeholders and make it work as well. But, in terms of complexity, I think the local piece is important. Yeah.
Mike, to your point in terms of finance, and probably most of you know that link, the Sustainable Finance Hub from the UNDP, but it's really a wealth of knowledge and information there, because there are like so many evolving branches and initiatives coming from that. You're starting from the impact management and measurement course that the Duke University put together on Coursera, that is really trying to drive to show, again, it's not necessary to show businesses how can actually make a profit, but also become slightly more sustainable. Yes, there will always be those who are trying to just keep business as usual and just try to hijack the model. But there is an opportunity to leverage finance for those social and environmental projects. And I think this is a high level, it's like a top, from the top bottom approach that needs to be, and I think to your point, Brenda, that needs to be come together with the localizing, with the local efforts, with the local initiatives, with the local energy to implement those things on the ground. Sometimes we have this discussion like, do we need this global frameworks, or do we need to just start working in our own communities? I would say it's not an either or, it's a both. We need both of those working together. And we usually hear about the big frameworks, and we're like trying to show also the importance of the local to make this really work.
You know, we found that in terms of injecting money into this process at the local level, it wasn't so much about money. When we looked for pilot communities, they were applying for $40,000 worth of support, services, and learning opportunities. It was the coaching that made the difference. We did provide some seed funding for their projects, but it was that they wanted to do something and weren't sure what to do. So, you know, we used the funding that we received to support that coaching and learning and peer-to-peer learning. So I don't know if that helped, but here we go. Oh,
we're almost at the top of the hour.
yeah,
so
I see that. I'm going to flip it back to Susanna. But I guess I just wanted to thank all of you for, you know, the nodding and the smiles and the nodding and the comments in the chat is just really reassuring that just maybe this path we've been on might be heading in the right direction. So thank you all, and over to you, Susanna.
Thank you, Brenda. Thank you, everybody, for this amazing session. Just important reminder, we have our closing ceremony for Catalyzing Change Week right after this session. I just posted the link in the chat. Please join us as well. And a couple of reminders on Catalyst 2030. We have our Catalyst Awards coming up very soon. So check the website and nominate. Also, we have this new tool that is called Ask Catalyst. Please help us checking it out. And if you find something interesting that you're liking, let us know. Or if you see that there's something that needs to be improved, let us know as well. This is a pilot. Also, explore Catalyst Market. It's a very interesting option to do some of your shopping. And if you are not yet a member of Catalyst 2030, explore our website, and we'll be very happy also to have a conversation with you or to invite you to be part of our network. And thank you again, and have a lovely rest of the Friday and a good weekend, and see you in a couple of minutes in the closing ceremony. Thank you, Luis Patricio. Thank you, Brenda. And thanks
everyone. Susanna, can you download the chat too? Because there's some
Yes.
questions we haven't answered and some links we need to explore. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yes. Okay. Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye, everyone.
Everyone.
Thank you.